Good afternoon and welcome to the CSPS bi-weekly seminar. Our topic is on refrigeration, food insecurity and nutrition, causal machine learning evidence from Ghana. Presenting this afternoon is Mr. Enoch Ntsiful. Mr. Ntsiful is a second-year PhD candidate in economics at the University of Barcelona in Spain. His research explores climate justice and the development of sustainable cooling or heating solutions for vulnerable communities. He is affiliated with the IEB Research Center at the University of Barcelona and also the Department for Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy. He actually has both a Bachelor of Arts and an MPhil in Economics from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And he also holds a Master's in Quantitative Economics from the University of Alicante in Spain. So, Enoch, we are very, very happy to have you as a presenter for our seminar this afternoon. You have about 30 to 35 minutes to do the presentation, after which we would invite our distinguished audience to ask you questions. So please go ahead and let's hear your presentation. Thank you all very much for joining our seminar this afternoon. Enoch, over to you.
All right, thank you very much for the wonderful opportunity. And I want to thank CSPS for this platform that I will be able to share my work. So Dr. Tibuida, thank you. And also special thanks to Dr. Novian, who paved the way for this presentation to come off. So, and I'm very happy also to see a lot of my former supervisors also on the call. And so I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of benefit from this meeting. And I'm presenting my work, which is supposed to be part of or it's actually part of my PhD, my first paper for the PhD that is a work in progress, which I'm working on it with my supervisor, Francois Cohen here. And we are trying to analyze refrigeration, how it affects food insecurity. And then as a result, what are the nutritional effects that we observe out of it? And the setting is actually from Ghana, where I come from. And it's a basic story, so as we move on, I'll try as much as possible to make it basic. It is still a work in progress, as I said, so we are very much open to a lot of comments. Whatever that you find that we are missing out, you can tell me, or you can send it to me at the end of the presentation when I share my email. Or there are questions you can put across. We are still working on it, so we are so much open to everything that may bring it out as I present. So it is tied to it's both methodological paper and then it's also a policy paper. So in this setting, I'll be presenting the methodological aspect, and then I'll also be discussing the policy perspective so that we can all be able to be on the same page in this discussion. So going forward, in this paper, what we first of all realize is that we live in a world where people are very hungry. So about 10% of the world is always hungry, and they go to bed without food. And out of this 10% that you observe in the world, we realize that 9 million of them die every year just because of hunger. All right. And this distribution is focused primarily in the African and the Asian region, which is the global south. So a lot of people are hungry and they are dying just because of hunger. But on the other hand, we see a lot of food waste ongoing. So about 1.3 billion tons of food is being wasted every year. And this amount of food that is wasted could be used to feed these 9 million people who die every year. Like we can feed them morning, afternoon, and evening, and then we will not be observing this death. So where does this food waste come from? We realize that data is showing that majority of the food waste is concentrated at the household level. That is where this food waste occurs. So we have a story that we want to write. We have a part of the world who is willing to eat anything at all. So this is a household that is completely starving. They don't have food to eat, and they are willing to eat anything at all, more or less. And then there is another side of the world that has abundance of food and majority is being wasted at the end of the day. So they don't have a problem. But then there's also a third group that we are focusing on. They don't have enough food, like they don't have surplus food. They just have what they can consume in a few days, and they have to preserve it for the coming days. But they are not able to preserve it well because they don't have a very good cold storage like refrigerators. So they are worried, they don't know what they will eat if they throw the food that is left away and all that. So this is where we have the story of food insecurity for the situation that you are more worried about what to eat the next day, or even when you have what to eat, you are worried about the nutritional quality of it because if you cannot preserve it, what you do is to use traditional ways of preserving it, which in the end poisons the food and then you end up with health outcomes. So this is the group that we have in mind as we are working on this paper. And we want to analyze whether if they have good, reliable cold chains, will it help in the issue of food insecurity that they are observing? So we rely on this simulation that across the world, they realize that uh, the 1.3 billion of food waste that is being wasted, if every region in terms of country groupings have reliable cold chains, they could be able to save actually about half of this 1.3 billion food that is being wasted every year. And of course, it's the sub-Saharan African region and the Asian communities who suffer a lot of food waste and death. They are going to benefit more from these cold chains. So that gives us an idea that better cold chains could help make a difference when it comes to food insecurity and food waste. All right. So in this graph, that is what you see, how cold chains are able to preserve. But this is not a causal analysis. This is a correlational and a simulation effect. So we just have our basic research question that what would be the causal impact of having a refrigerator and how it will influence the food insecurity in the household, and how will household adapt in that situation in terms of food, expenditure and the nutritional outcomes thereof. And then if time, we will be able to look at the health implications. And I understand we have a very diverse community here. So it's actually on the health implications and the health policies that I will also, we are very much also open to a lot of comments. And if you have anything for us, as I present, I will explain and then you tell us what we can do. So this is the basic research question that we want to analyze in this paper. And just a brief spoiler of what I'm going to tell you ahead of the paper. What we are doing is that we are relying on the data from Ghana, and then we construct a treatment where the emphasis is that we have households that bought a refrigerator at the same time and at the same price, at very similar prices, and then they live in the same community, so they are exposed to the same kind of issues and the same kind of effects. But then one household got their fridge broken down, and another household got their fridge still working. So they bought it at the same time at very similar prices. They are exposed to the same issues, but for whatever reason, one household's refrigerator was not working at the time of the survey, and another household's refrigerator was working. So we rely on this kind of variation to analyze what will be the effect of having a refrigerator that is broken on your food insecurity situation. So the summary of the results so far that we see is that if you live in a household that the refrigerator is not working, compared to someone who lives in a household that the refrigerator is working, these households with broken refrigerators are more likely to suffer food insecurity, which is about 13 percentage points. And also, as a response to that, what they do is that your refrigerator is not working. So they cut down expenditure on foods that demand refrigeration, such as meat and milk and eggs and fish. But then for other food that does not demand refrigeration, like the cereals and all that, we don't see any impact from our analysis. And then we try to understand what is the nutrient that these people are consuming. And we see that those with broken refrigerators, because they are spending less on the animal source foods, which are also rich in macro and micronutrients, they get less nutrients from those sources. But then they are now getting more nutrients, the same nutrients from other non-animal sources. So it's almost like an adaptation strategy where you spend less on certain food, and then now you are getting the same nutrients from other food sources. But then these nutrients are of different quality in essence. And that is where we realize that there could be some health implications. If you are now eating more of cereals, more of other food, other than the animal source foods, which are also very rich and nutritious for growth and development. So far, we see that these households will have health implications like stunting. And in terms of distribution, we see that large households and then households that live in community without markets are highly impacted. This is the basic result that we have so far. And then going forward, in the literature, what we see is that there's been a lot of analysis when it comes to household appliances. People focus on food outcomes, others focus basically on food, but then on expenditure and then diversity scores. And then in terms of health, most studies focus on only children under 5 years. We don't have any direct paper that look at food insecurity and household refrigerators in the way we want to look at in this paper. So our contribution to the literature is to provide a causal impact on food insecurity when it comes to refrigerators. And also we think it is very much important in this sense when it comes to policy making, because most of these countries are now designing their cooling policies, and refrigerator is very important when it comes to cooling. So in designing these policies, it is important to now understand how when we feature refrigerators into household policies and nutritional and food policies, how this can have a lot of impact. Okay. And then we don't have much studies also on low-income countries. So we try to provide also a very nice work, which will be very much enough for low-income country settings and middle-income country settings such as Ghana. And so basically that's the contribution of the paper that we have. I may not be able to go much into it, but then one strong contribution we are making is on the causal impact that I've already said, and then we provide the methodological approach because of what we have observed in the literature when it comes to household appliances and their analysis. And then also our work is also tied, it's not just methodological approach, it's also tied to policy. So we are looking at energy infrastructure, such as electricity itself, and then the adoption of household appliances, and then tied to food policies that will help in reducing food waste or preserving food items, and then also tied to the issues of nutritional health. So we have a wide scope of policies that out of this paper we can be able to help, especially in Ghana, where we have a lot of issues when it comes to both energy, food policies, and then nutritional issues. So brief institutional setup about Ghana is that what you observe is that about 40% of the households are very food insecure. And then almost half of the food that is being imported or produced are always wasted at the end of the day. However, we don't have a very robust direct consumer level policy that will help to reduce this food waste at the household level, as we saw from the previous picture. So it gives an idea that this policy, this issue of food waste may continue if we don't find alternative ways of solving it. But it's not an issue of just electricity, because about 85% of the country is electrified with access to electricity. Okay, so we have a very ready market where if they have refrigerators, it could be helpful for the community members. And then households that don't have refrigerator, we realize that from this paper, a few years later, I realized that you have to go to your neighbor and then tell them that, okay, I have meat, can you keep it for me? But then you have to pay, for some people, you have to pay before you keep your food. And this has an economic burden. And if you don't want to pay, then go to the traditional method, which will also end up poisoning your food. So there is this diverse issue all around the country, which needs to be addressed. And in terms of the appliances that we consider in Ghana, most of them are very old appliances that already arrived in the country when they are at the end of their life. So they don't last long. And people don't have much interest of repairing the appliances because of the bulky nature or the economic burden of also repairing these appliances. So people keep the appliances even if they are broken down because they don't know how to repair it or they are not able to repair it. It's not in the analysis, in the data that you realize, like you can have a whole community, there is no repairing shop for these appliances, especially in the rural areas. So people keep those broken appliances despite the environmental effects that it may have. And that is how come we are able to have this data to do this analysis. All right. So to the data, this is a very popular data that we all know from Ghana when it comes to the Living Standard Survey. We are using the last two waves, 2012 and 2016. And then in that data is where you can find where they ask about the household appliances. So for all appliances, we know the price of the appliance, we know when you bought the appliance, whether it was a gift or not, and whether it is still working or not working. So after cleaning this data, we came out with this about 8,000 households. And that is what we focus on for our analysis in this case. And then also we have the food insecurity outcomes. So in this work I'm going to present, we have all the 8 indicators of food insecurity that they asked in the questionnaire. But when we use them to construct 2 measures of food insecurity. The risk measure, which is binary. So it is equal to 1 if the person is at least responding to one of the 8 questions. So that means that the household is at a risk of food insecurity. And then we have a summation from 0 to 8. So the higher the value, the highly food insecure you are. And then also we have this bunch of food expenditure that households spend also in this survey. So we group them across food groups. So we have the animal source foods and then a lot of non-animal source foods, which I will show you the full list at the end of the results. But then we have these fruits, vegetables, cereals. So we group them according to their food groups as in the questionnaire. And then alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. And then we do the transformations and all that in order to make sure the results can be interpretable. And then how do we know these food items that we have here? How do we know the nutrient content of this food? Okay, so we have to match the whole data set that we have with food composition database from FAO for West African food items. And then from these food groups, so when we take each food, like let's say an egg, we have to remove the shell of the egg and then estimate what is the nutrient that we get from consuming the egg. So we are interested in the edible part of all the food items. So for plantain, we are interested in the edible part of the plantain. So we have to estimate only the edible parts by removing off the peel of the plantain, and it cuts across all the food groups. And then we want to know what nutrients these food items contain. So we compute macronutrients from every food item in the GLSS. And then we understand the protein content of the food that people purchase, the carbohydrates, the fats, and also the vitamins and all that. And then so we have the macro and the micronutrients for every 100 grams of food that households consume. That is what gives us an idea of the nutrient content of what the households are purchasing or consuming. And in terms of the health, instead of the other works that look at just under 5, we go beyond to look at household members up to 23 years. Because we understand from the trends in Ghana when it comes to nutrition that we are doing better over the years. So the concentration is not just on the under 5 people, there is just household level effects. We do only up to 23 years because that is what the code we are using allows us to, not beyond. But then if you want to look at BMI and weight of the people, we can look at the entire household, and that is what we do actually in this case. So that is the data sets. And just to bore you with some methodologies, because if you look at the literature, people who compare when it comes to household appliances in general, they always compare those who have versus those who don't have. And then they try to argue or establish a causal effect. But we prove in this paper that such kind of comparison usually have still issues. They are not, like we have to attribute causality with much care because these households, no matter the controls that you use, there's still going to be some form of endogeneity issues when you compare these two households. But then in our case, what we do is that we are not comparing those who have and those who don't have. We only focus on those who have. So all these people have the same purchasing ability, they have almost the same characteristics, and they have ability to buy the appliance. So it's not a matter of having and not having. And then for whatever reason, it broke down. We don't have the information in the data set to tell us why the appliance broke down or how it came about. So we try to establish causality from this kind of treatment. So it's equal to 1 if the appliance is not working, and the control group are those whose appliances are still working. And then we take a step-by-step approach. So conditional on the information that we have on the fridge, like the price, when you bought it, and whether it was a gift or not. When we do matching, when we match households that live in the same community, you are exposed to the same repairer, you are exposed to the same power outages, you are exposed to the same market systems and everything. So we condition on that comparison and matching that these households are very much similar. But then it could still be that there are issues. So conditional on this assumption, we believe that whether your appliance should be working or not working, the fact that you all bought it at the same time and at very similar prices, it should be very much random. Why is your appliance not working and why is mine working? When we bought it at the same time, we are exposed to the same community or environmental issues in the same area. So that's the assumption, that's a strong assumption we make in this paper, then to establish our causality. But then we know that still this assumption can fail because of a whole lot of reasons, maybe inherent characteristics or abilities of the household members, or they are forward-looking and everything. So we go much a step further. That is where we have the machine learning approach coming in. So in matching estimators, what people usually do is to just take the relevant covariate or control variables that you think are very helpful in matching your treatment and control groups. But that is usually affected by the researcher's subjectivity or subjectivity. So it is not very much objective. So we rely on a data-driven approach with the machine learning, where we have a whole set of covariates from the GLSS data, which predicts the probability of the appliance working or not working. Okay, so we use the machine learning approach to select these covariates based on the identification that we have, the treatment that we have designed in steps 1 and 2. So for instance, if the household size, it could be that one household is more careful in keeping the appliance more than the other, or one household is more interested in repairing the appliances than the other. We try to use pre-selected covariates like the household size, because if the household size is big, it's more likely that they will be using the appliance more often, the refrigerator more often, and that could contribute to it breaking down. So we condition on some of this information. And also, if you live in a house that the fridge is not working, we try to see, is there any appliance in the house that is also not working? So households that have fridges to be broken, they also tend to have other appliances which are not working. That helps us to capture things like, okay, this household has a poor maintenance habit, and all those things that we cannot directly observe. And that helps us to make our groups very much comparable. And for the rest of the information that we don't want to just add and subtract, we just allow the machine learning lasso to do the selection of these covariates for us to be able to establish proper causality. And then the last thing we do, which I wouldn't like to bore you that much, is we just estimate a certain gamma, which helps us to, it could be that all the steps we have done so far, there is still a confounder, something that we have not captured, which will make these households not comparable. So we estimate a parameter and we tell the parameter. So the parameter is just like, assume there is something that can really influence our results, but we are not able to capture in this case. If that variable is there, how will our results change? So I'm going to present that result in percentages. If you see a higher percentage, that means that even if there is still something outside what we have done, it will still not change our result. That means our result is very stable and causal, and we can make relevant policy implications out of it. But then if it is very low, if the percentage of the gamma value you see in the work is very low, that means we should be careful about causality in that case, and then policy implications may not be as reliable as we are claiming in this paper. So we use a machine learning approach, which is a very good way, and then we employ entropy balance matching, which helps us to ensure that our groups are very much comparable. And then when we do, we see that we have a very perfect balance. This means that households with broken fridge and households with working fridge, what our identification is showing that these households are very comparable to help us when it comes to the food insecurity model. They are very much comparable. And then we look at the results, we see that these households are suffering from food insecurity. So here the result is telling us that if you consider a household that the fridge is not working, they are highly impacted in terms of food insecurity. So that's what we saw at the beginning. 13 percentage points more likely to experience food insecurity. Okay, compared to households that have working fridges. And the gamma here tells us that this is not something that is just cooking, we are cooking it up. It means that even if there is still an information which is outside our model that we couldn't capture, even in the presence of that confounder, our estimates are still going to be very much robust. 390% is super, super robust. Okay, so it gives us the idea that this analysis here is very much stable and causal. And then when it comes to the food expenditure, there is also a perfect balance between the covariates, which gives us an idea in the result that these households, when you look at all the food, the animal source foods, they have these implications of reducing the expenditure on the animal source food. And then the gamma here also gives us very high values, indicating that these are very stable causal effects. So we have households who are suffering from food insecurity, and as a form of adaptation, they don't want to now be just spending anyhow. They try to reduce the expenditure on food that demand refrigeration because their refrigerators are not working. So they are now reducing expenditure on animal source foods that demand refrigeration. But then we don't see them transferring those remaining income into non-animal source food. So when it comes to fruits, when it comes to vegetables, we don't see any impact over there. So they are only reducing expenditure on animal source foods. We don't see a transfer of or a shift in food consumption from animal source to non-animal source. It's just a lower expenditure in that area. But then we see that effect that they are rather around eating outside the home. And that is what we explore in our mechanism. We see that they are now eating in canteens and outside the house. Okay, but that one we are not able to tell because eating outside the home, it could be rice with meat and everything. We can't tell the disaggregated food groups, but we just know that they are eating less of the animal source foods and they are eating more outside the house. So in understanding the nutrients that they take, we see that because they are spending less on the animal source foods like the meat, the eggs and milk, the protein, carbohydrates and fat and energy that they get from these foods are also less. Okay, they are getting less nutrients from these sources, which are good for growth, but then they are getting more, almost the same amount of nutrient they are losing in the animal source foods. They are getting almost the same equivalent from cereals, flour and bread, and then root tubers such as the cassava and the plantain, these things which are very much common in Ghana. Okay. So they are getting this almost the same equivalent of nutrients from those sources. This is in quantities. But then in nutritional studies, we know that the nutrients that we get from here are very primary and very good compared to the nutrient that we get from these cases, even though you are getting the same quantity. But then the quality is also much different. Okay, so this is so far, this is what we see. And then we try to, in the micronutrients, is the same thing. Vitamins, minerals, and cholesterol. The less is coming from where they are spending less money, and more is coming from the non-animal source food. And then in terms of health, we see this issue here that they are having stunting. So households with broken refrigerators, because they are impacted with food insecurity, they are spending less on these animal source foods and they are getting less nutrients. We see some form of stunting here. But then in terms of all the other indicators like BMI and household, the individual weights, we don't see any impact at all. Okay. So we do a lot of heterogeneity, we do a lot of placebo, we do a lot of analysis just to understand that our effect is still stable. Everything that we have done so far indicate that our effects are stable. In terms of the heterogeneity, which will be only the one that I will talk about because of time. As we said, households that live in the big household sizes. So if you live in a household that is very big, they are more impacted compared to those who live in smaller households. And then households with broken fridges, they tend to now spend more outside the market. Okay. So they spend more outside the home rather, sorry. So they are eating more outside home compared to eating more inside the house now. And then the placebo, we use other appliances in the household to see that these results are stable. We see a lot of stability in our results. And then the last thing that we do is that, okay, what are you going to do with those without fridges? Because in the first part of the work, we did not consider them. And then we want to see works that compare those with fridges versus those without fridges. So here, our interest is just on the gamma. And we see that if you compare those with fridges versus those without fridges, just like we see in a lot of works, the gamma here, X means that it is highly sensitive. That means attributing causality to those works is something we should do with much care. We cannot all of a sudden say it is very causal. Maybe it's more of correlational than causality because these households are very much different no matter the covariate that we control for. And the same thing when it comes to expenditure outcomes. They are very, very low compared to what we see in the analysis that we have done so far. So in conclusion, what we see so far is that households with broken refrigerators tend to suffer more from food insecurity. They adapt to it by trying to reduce their expenditure on animal source foods and also eat more outside the home instead of maybe eating animal source food. And as a result, they get less macro and micronutrients from these issues that the way they adapt to the food insecurity, they get less nutrients, which has possible health implications. And then the heterogeneity result that we observe. As we said, it's still a work in progress. So we want to understand more of the heterogeneous impacts, okay? Because we see that, for instance, this tangent that we observe, in the GLSS, information is only available in the last wave. So the health analysis we do is from the last wave of the GLSS. And so we are not really able to capture the health effects across. And then we don't have any other data set that can help us understand it. Because when you go outside the GLSS, we don't have a data set that helps us to estimate whether your fridge is working or not. It's only in the GLSS that we're able to have this information. So the causality, the health analysis is something that we still argue that it should be taken much with care. And we are trying to find other ways, like we are now going outside the GLSS to see what we can really do to tell a story when it comes to the health analysis. And also we are lacking something on, we want to do extra analysis outside this kind of framework to look at how power outages, which could influence appliance breaking down, but then we don't have power outage data sets yet. I understand it's very much available because I checked the Ghana Energy Commission. They have the district level, but then it's not available outside their community. And then we are not getting that data set. So we also put it here that in case anyone has any help to enable us get power outage data, either at the district level or regional level, so that we can now tell, because we understand frequent power outages could contribute to an appliance working or not working. So we want to use that exogenous variation to see how the result will also play out compared to what we have done so far. Okay. So this is what we have done. And then the policy implications is what now we are working on, because this analysis of energy infrastructure goes all around from what you are having. So if your appliance is working or is not working, it has effect on the food you are consuming, the food waste issues that we are having in the country, and also the health implications that we are observing, the trend that we have in Ghana so far. So it is a very intertwined issue. And we think that analyzing such a policy through such a causal and a robust mechanism is going to be very much helpful. And that is what this paper has tried to do so far. And we are trying to get it done. So that is the end of this presentation because I really want a lot of questions and comments. So this is the end of what I intend to share so far for today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much to Enoch. This is indeed a very, very eye-opening presentation and discussion. And we are very grateful that you accepted to present at the CSPS bi-weekly seminar. So, our dear audience, this is Enoch's presentation, very interesting and informative. Some technical aspect of it, especially when it comes to all the quantitative analysis that he put through. But I think that's why Enoch is there and he's open to questions, better explanations, contributions. And we are looking forward to the policy implications. I was particularly interested in that. So it's good you mentioned that these also would definitely have some policy implications. So I would now open for questions. If you kindly would raise your hand, I've opened the chat page so that I can see if any hands are up for questions for Enoch. And I'd respectfully ask you to unmute. I think I can see my colleague, Dr. Dunfe's hand is already up. And Dr. Dunfe, you may unmute and then go ahead and be the first person to ask Enoch a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, Madam Chair. Let me say another good afternoon to Enoch. Thanks so much for the presentation, so beautifully done. I'm especially excited with in trying to establish causality between refrigeration and food insecurity. In this country, I think one problem that we have with our policy making has been attributions. Most of policies are driven by just mere correlations. We are not able to establish causality. If we're able to establish causality, the implication here is that of all the other variables that can move a particular decision to where we see it, this particular one, this is what it is doing. And to me, that's the best policy, foundation. And so it's a very good attempt. You indicated that this is the first causal impact of refrigeration on food insecurity. I didn't hear, were you referring only to Ghana or everywhere in the world? And this is the first of its kind. And if the answer is yes or no, what do we know currently about how the traditional preservation, food preservation methods affect? When I talk about the traditional food preservation techniques, I'm referring to drying, smoking, salting. How have they also affected or have they impacted on food insecurity? My second issue had to do with the data. You made mention of the fact that when you were looking at the health perspective, you made mention of the fact that it's only JLSS that can do what you are doing. I'm not too sure whether you are aware about ESE's longitudinal data. I used to work at ESE as principal research assistant, and I remember somewhere 2009, 2010, we started that exercise, and now I think they have about the fourth round, and that is longitudinal. Just like JLSS, and the good thing about it is that this is panel. This is panel, which means that individual households have been followed over time. And the questionnaire, the instruments were designed along the JLSS. I'm not too sure about the current design, but when I was there, the design was almost like the JLSS, and we were covering almost every question in the JLSS. So maybe you want to try that data if you don't know much about that data. Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Thank you,
pleasure.
Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dumpe. I think I had another hand up, but it's been lowered. Angela Boachi. So what we can do is, Enoch, you can go ahead and answer these two questions, and then we'll come back to Angela. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. George, thank you very much for the feedback. Let me start from the second one. So I've considered the socioeconomic panel data from Ghana, and we've gone through the data set. It follows the GLSS, as you were saying, very much, very longitudinal. But then the comment I was making is that when you go outside the GLSS, you can have a refrigerator and all the information we have, but then we can't tell. There is no question in the longitudinal data that tells us that the refrigerator is working or broken. In the socioeconomic panel data, they only ask whether you have or you don't have. So the comparison we can only do is to compare those who have versus those who don't have, but we can't tell. Like the identification that we have is whether it is working or not. So that is the only thing that limits us from using that particular data set. Okay. And that is our only problem. But then if we get maybe exogenous variation like the power outages data set, we could use that very much, and then that would really help us because it is a very longitudinal data set. So that is only our problem. Outside GLSS, we don't find any data set that is able to ask, do you have or not? And then if you have, is it working or not working? The second session is only limited to GLSS so far. But then if there is a data set that someone knows that has this information, we will be very grateful. Outside Ghana, we don't have any information like that. We just recently got in touch with a company that has that information, but then it's very much limited, like just some few observations. So it's also not useful. And then the first part on the causality, is first, we are saying it is first causal because yes, outside Ghana, we don't see any work that has been able to analyze refrigerator on food insecurity to the best of our knowledge. And also other works that look at this nexus usually do simulations or just run the determinants, which are like correlation analysis. Okay. One work that came close only used 17 to 47 interviews. That was what I showed at the part of my literature review. But then time didn't permit me to go much into it. It's just an interview that happened in UK and US. Okay. That is this paper, these two papers. So they just conducted 17 interviews during the COVID by putting a refrigerator along the roadside to see those who come for it and whether it helped them or not. So it's not a causal analysis, it was just a discussant or a descriptive analysis that they have. But then we don't observe anything outside the country. So we think this work will be very much helpful for the low-income country settings, especially in the global south. And also because in the developed economies, almost everyone has a refrigerator and mostly they are working. So our concern is on the developing world where we are more vulnerable in terms of food waste and food insecurity. Thank you very much. Yes, please,
Okay,
Angela.
thank you. Yes, I think Angela has her hand up. So Angela, you can
Yeah,
go ahead and ask your question. Yes, please.
thank you. Thank you very much. And hi, it's a really interesting presentation. My question is more of like teasing your mind a bit because we know in our Ghanaian societies we are not really distinct from each other. Our communities are kind of connected. So, for example, if house A does not have a fridge, it's really possible that they might have a neighbor whose fridge is also working. And even probably in the same household, if you have people renting, and maybe there's a particular room that does not have a fridge working, there could be another room who has a fridge working. So my question is more of, are we able to estimate the spillover effect? Let's say if my fridge is not working, and then occasionally I give my food or I store my food with my neighbor. Are we able to analyze the spillover effect that the treatment really could have on people that do not have a fridge? Bearing in mind that there could be instances where they stored their food with their neighbors.
Okay.
I don't know if my question is clear.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Can we have another question and then you can answer the two? Is that okay?
Yes, please. I think Dr. Frank and Dr. Novia have,
Yes.
so I
Okay.
can listen to both of
Yes.
them.
Okay. So then let's take all of the questions. So a question from Dr. Frank and then one from Sanovinya, and then you can answer all three. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Frank, please, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam. Thank you very much, Enoch. I think your work is very interesting, and I like your identification strategy. But I think I have some few basic things that I want to draw attention to. So, for instance, your treatment group, or your treatment, basically comparing those who are currently using refrigerator and those whose refrigerators are broken. I was wondering if you check the electricity status of these households, right? So did you check whether these households within the same community have access to electricity, or did you check whether the community that the households are living have access to electricity? Because I think that is very important in trying to come out with these effects that you have. Another thing that I also want to draw attention to is it's just a question that you can think of. Do you think that, for instance, the size of a fridge that a person is having, even between households whose fridge are working, for instance, would change your results a bit in terms of the magnitude of the health effects that you are trying to capture? And another thing that I also want to suggest is, especially I think you asked of how maybe possible data sets that you can use to account for power outages. If at the firm level it was very easy, you could use the World Bank data, but at the household level, it's going to be very difficult unless you use satellite lightning data, right? So I think Justice Mensah at the World Bank used a lightning data as an instrument for his power outages paper, and I think it's a satellite data. So maybe you can try and check that out. Maybe that can assist you in a way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will listen to Dr. Novia and then.
Hello, Dr.
Hi.
Novion.
Yes.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Enoch. So I think, I don't need to overemphasize the point that your presentation was great. Your approach identification strategy, as they say, in the absence of the gold standard. This is an important approach to ensure that we are identifying the right impacts, the magnitudes, and the right targeting for policy. I have 2 points. I think the first one was with what Dr. Dumfe mentioned on the traditional approaches. I think it's a very essential point. Some scholars have already started advocating for what they call indigenous economics, broadly indigenous scholarship. That does not completely exclude our traditional practices that define context properly. So, for example, we know that years and years, our forefathers, even up to now, people still use traditional approaches to preserve food. And I guess that's not captured in the analysis, but it would be good to sort of discuss what this means, in the paper. And then the second one is the policy direction. You mentioned electricity access, but I think also essential is the cost of electricity. Because if you think about it, food insecurity is a bigger burden amongst economically disadvantaged individuals. And if you look at the data carefully, we are talking about people who are living below $1 a day. And so paying for electricity when they have refrigerators can be a challenge. So I think that when you eventually arrive at your policy recommendations, you should also consider not just the physical access to electricity, but also the financial access, which could determine greatly whether somebody owns a refrigerator and actually uses that refrigerator. Thank you. Good job.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let me start from Dr. Nobinya.
Thank you. Enoch, I just want to caution, barely 5 minutes for us to end. We try to stick to our time. So please be very brief in your answers. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So for the policy, yes, I've taken note of that one. And we've already contacted the Ghana Food and Agricultural Authority about this analysis that we've done so far, because they already have the FBDG going on. So our work is likely to fuse into their work. But then the energy side is something that we are having issues trying to make sure that it will have some national effect, because they are not very much open yet in receiving, but we are still pushing. So we are sure we will discuss this cost of electricity issues in the main paper. For the indigenous practices and traditional effects, we discussed this in the main paper, but then I didn't add it to the presentation. So all the traditional effects that Dr. already mentioned, we've discussed at length the traditional preservation practices, their effects and everything in a very descriptive way in the main paper. Yes. And then for the size of refrigerator that Dr. Frank is talking about, we don't have refrigerator brand or any characteristics of the refrigerator in the data sets, unless we go to the maybe LG, Samsung, the companies in Ghana to now just get information. But then we don't have money to go like that. So we are not able to know the appliance characteristics or the brand in the data set. And that is what limits us in analyzing the size of the refrigerator and all that. And then, yes, electricity, as I showed here, we limit our sample to only those with a reliable electricity access in the household. So we don't have confounding effects from those without electricity or without reliable. So we only look at those connected to the grid or solar. If you are using battery and all those ones, we know they cannot power refrigerator for a long time. So those people are outside our sample. And then to Dr. Angela, who is also my co-author, and my classmates as well. Yeah, that spillover effect is something that I've been asked a lot. We are not able to tell people who put their food in other people's household. But then also, although Ghana is very much connected, we argue it is not going to be a consistent practice. Like you can't say that my fridge is broken for 1 year. So the whole year, whenever I buy meat, I give it to someone to keep for me for free. Like it is possible, but then we don't see it to be a very consistent practice across country over time, like across the whole country over time. So there could be like maybe some few weeks you can keep your meat with someone, but you can't go every time. Okay, today I have meat, tomorrow I have egg, tomorrow I have fish, keep it for me, keep it for me. Like it is not going. So we think that effect, even though could be present, but may not be able to alter the whole result that we have. We don't know yet how we can account for that spillover effect, because we've been asked a lot, we've thought about it, but then we don't know yet. But then if anyone has an idea of how we can do that, we are also very much open. You can send me a mail about it, or like those who can contact me directly by any means can also contact me through my email that I saw on the screen. Yeah, so basically that is what I can say on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Enoch. Thank you for all the feedback. I see there's another hand up. We actually have run out of time, but I see Paul in Quebec. Paul, is that a question or a contribution?
It's a question, a quick one, given the
Please.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, given the time, just please go quickly. Yes.
Okay. Enoch, refrigeration is usually meant to extend the shelf life of food. So its impact on food security might be very direct. Don't you think its impact on nutrition security might be more interesting? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we think it will be interesting on nutrition. And then because of how the food insecurity measure is being discussed, we think it will also have impact on food insecurity, because it's only when you have the refrigerator that we think of buying the food that you want in order to get a nutrient outcome. So the nutrient outcome is there, But then we also think the food insecurity issue is there because I don't have the refrigerator, maybe I try not to go at all to get certain food items. That's why we start our analysis from the first level. And then we know it's based on that approach that you try to know what to buy, and then the nutritional issues will come in. So we think both effects are possible, but then one may come before the other. And then we argue that the food insecurity may come before the nutrition, because it's based on that you are making the nutritional decision, or based on what you eat that you get the nutrient outcomes. So I think that was the motivation for twisting the question in that direction, actually. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Enoch. I think at this point, we can say that we have exhausted all the time. And Enoch, by virtue of me chairing this program and also the coordinator, I just want to say that I'm very, very interested in the traditional food preservation methods, because the refrigeration, and as Dr. Dufe earlier suggested, smoking, drying. I think we must also consider baking and actually ways of converting food into other forms like the powder form and etc., especially when it comes to local foodstuffs like yam, cassava. We realize that all of these things are now becoming ways of preserving food. And it'll be interesting to see if all of this has an effect then on nutrition. But all the same, thank you very much for presenting. This has been very enlightening, eye-opening, and interesting. We wish you the best, and we hope that you'll come again with a complete aspect on the policy implications, which I think would also give us a lot of information. Thank you to your supervisors, to other colleagues who joined. And we want to ask that if you are interested in presenting at our bi-weekly seminar, which we hold every other Thursday, we are happy to look at your abstract and to give you some feedback. You can send us an email on seminar.csps, of course, .ug.edu.gh. We will be very happy. You can also view our seminars. We put the YouTube videos up on our YouTube site for CSPS, and we are very happy if you'd go there and watch our videos. Thank you all very much to our students, UG faculty, all friends and interested participants for joining the seminar. Thank you once again, Enoch, for presenting, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone.